Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real, lead us from darkness to light, lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Well, it's a privilege and an honor to be here in the United Nations Office, High Commission for Human Rights, in this beautiful city. Right now I can see Lake Geneva in front of me, a beautiful view. Welcome to this August gathering here in person, and also those who are watching online. When the issue is diversity and tolerance, acceptance, the feeling that I have is that there is something wonderful to be learned from the Indian experience, from the experience that we have had in the Indian subcontinent with diversity over a period of maybe 3 to 4 millennia, thousands of years. I mean, just think about it in terms of religion alone. Since I am a monk and a person of religion, I will sort of focus my observations in this area, but not limited to this area. But if you look at just religion alone, Mark Twain, who visited India at one time, he said, in the world of religion, there is only one millionaire, and that is India. And truly, if you look at Indian history, some of the world's major religions have actually originated from India. Hinduism, one of the world's most ancient living faiths in the world today, is of course from the Indian subcontinent. So is Buddhism. The Buddha was born there 2,500 years ago. Jainism, which is sort of elder contemporary of Buddhism, again from India and primarily based in India. Then you have, almost at the very beginning of Christianity, just after the time of Jesus Christ, you have communities of Christians in India. About going back almost 2,000 years, there was a community of Syrian Christians who came to India around 2,000 years ago. And from that time onwards, you have the Jewish community there. Nearly 2,000 years ago, after the destruction of the Second Temple, the first Jewish community came to India. You have the Islamic community there, almost starting during the lifetime of the Prophet. From that time onwards, one of the first mosques was set up in India actually. It's still there, I believe, in Kerala. Then Sikhism originated in India. Zoroastrians, who fled from Persia, and they established a vibrant community in India, which is even now a very major presence in India. A tiny community, but a very honored, very successful community. We call them Parsis in India. So they are there. I don't know whom I missed out, but all of these religions have been in India for centuries, if not millennia. So a tremendous diversity there. And this experience of coexisting together in harmony, and not always in harmony, till down to today. I think this is a good thing for us to take a look at that experience and see what lessons, practical applications can be drawn from that experience, which might be of use to the wider world, especially in this 21st century, when we still unfortunately have issues of conflict based, at least with some sources, in religion. So, okay, let me dive into this. I'll speak for maybe 20-25 minutes, and then it's much more productive to talk about it and see where I can elucidate points, what I can pick up from all of you. Sometimes in the United States, as a representative of Hinduism, I'm asked to talk to school students about Hinduism. And the way I try to explain it to them is, one of the things that I say to them is, any question that you can ask about Hinduism, the answer is always yes and no. Do Hindus believe in God? Of course, yes, tremendously so. And no, there are philosophies in Orthodox Hinduism which are agnostic or even frankly atheistic. Is God male? Yes, of course. And of course not, because the worship of God as the divine mother in the female, the divine feminine, is well known in India. In fact, some of the most ancient excavations have, you've had figures of divinities which are obviously the mother goddess, the female form, and the worship of God as mother is very well established in India, especially from the part of India from which I come, the eastern part of India, and the Swami also. The major religious worship there is Durga Puja, which is the worship of the divine mother, God in the female form. Does God have a form? Of course, anybody who has visited Hindu temples anywhere in the world is likely to be bewildered by the colorful variety of deities. And no, it is also well recognized that God is ultimately without form, but can take multiple forms. And those forms can be various, can be male, female, can be human, non-human, can be elemental in the form of water and air and fire and so on, and no form at all. So in these ways, you see a tremendous diversity within Hinduism. I'm often told that, well, all of these ancient traditions, whether it is Christianity or Islam, they all have a lot of enormous diversity. And my response is, half seriously, is that you don't know what diversity is until you see what's going on in Hinduism. This is one point. The other point I would like to raise here is that the more or less lack of conflict from diversity. The problem with diversity has been that it leads to friction and conflict. From the most ancient prehistoric times, when one tribe would come across the other, the immediate result would inevitably be violence. That they would engage in fights or try to wipe out the other or subjugate the other. Religions came up as a solution to that. In fact, the very word religion, I'm given to understand the Latin roots mean to unite, to bind together. So instead of numerous tribes which may be related to each other by blood or by location or community, you have a super tribe of people of faith belonging to, with a transcendent purpose, with a transcendent story and a narrative. And so people from various tribes across various geographical locations, across time and space, can belong to the same quote-unquote super tribe. And therefore the harmony within the tribe is extended to everybody else. But sometimes solutions also are the seeds of future problems. The moment you have a super tribe of, all of us belonging to X, Y, or Z religion, then immediately those who do not belong to that religion become the other. And the same problem of exclusion and violence and non-acceptance, basically, that continues. I loved that what you said about tolerance and acceptance. I remember Swami Vivekananda coming from India to the World Parliament of Religions in 1893. He gave a landmark talk, which, by the way, very interestingly, is on September 11. In New York, whenever we talk about 9/11, immediately the reaction is, of course, it's terrorism and religious violence and fanaticism. Whereas for us, 9/11 actually is, in our tradition, is the speech given by Vivekananda at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893, where he talks about religious harmony. And he starts off by saying, even tolerance doesn't quite cut it. Tolerance includes, I know I am right, I know you are wrong, but I'm a gentleman, so I tolerate you. That includes the seeds of intolerance. Whereas Vivekananda said the Indian tradition has been not tolerance but acceptance. So acceptance of you in your diversity, in your difference, not just tolerance of the other. And this led to the other feature. The first feature, as I said, is the tremendous internal diversity within Hinduism, which continues down to this present day. Tremendous diversity. If you don't even have to go to India. You have to go visit any Hindu temple to see the tremendous diversity there. I have seen Hindu temples in the United States where every possible deity or tradition of Hinduism is represented. But also, very interestingly, you have a shrine dedicated to Mahavira, Jainism. And Jains actually come and worship there, though it is demographically, technically a different religion. And there are Hindu temples with separate shrines, including the Buddha, the shrines for the Buddha. And if you just stop and think about it, theologically, how utterly different the two are. Here is the Buddha, and here is the temple full of Hindu deities, all of whom the Buddha repudiated. You have the sense of God. Do you believe in God? The Hindus will say yes, and the Buddhists will say either no or they are agnostic about it. What about the cherished belief in an eternal, immortal soul, the Atman? The Buddhists will say no, there's an Atman, there's no such thing. And yet, that is seen as a view entirely acceptable in the spectrum of Hinduism, as another spiritual path. So this tremendous diversity, and this diversity is extended to the other. Not only within Hinduism, the tremendously diverse belief systems and practices within Hinduism, but also to the Buddhist, which is theologically, there's far more difference, say, theologically in many ways, between Buddhism and Hinduism than there is between Hinduism and Islam or Christianity, for example. And yet it is accepted as part of the spectrum of spirituality there. And then this diversity automatically translates into extending it to the other. When the Christian comes or the Muslim comes, all right, so here is another group of people, another tradition. Just like we have this diversity within ourselves, this is also another form of worship and of spirituality, and as valid as everything else. So this is one aspect. The second aspect I'll touch upon, and then we'll dig deeper to see what makes all this possible and what we can learn from it. The second aspect is harmony, the peace between various groups which may be competing otherwise. Now, if you look at the context of India, it's not that India was a particularly peaceful place across the centuries or millennia. There have been empires and kingdoms in its long history, thousands of years, wars and wars throughout the history of India. In fact, the great epics of India, Ramayana and Mahabharata, in each there's a great war in each of these. And yet, it is so startling that not once in the entire history of India down to the last millennium, up to say 1000 AD or so, you do not find religion-based wars. No wars or persecution based on religion. That is simply unheard of. And it is not something that Indians particularly take note of. It's only when you come out of India, you come to Europe or America, and then you look around and then you begin to see certain underlying differences. So, in contrast to the Middle East, to Europe, that there have been no wars of religion. And it is a land which is drenched in religion. And yet how did they not come upon this bright idea of, I am right, you are wrong, let's have a good fight about it, let me kill all of you or convert all of you to my faith? That doesn't seem to have been the case. Even missionary activity, proselytizing, the Buddhists were probably the first proselytizers or missionaries of the world. And they converted half of the world at that time, across Asia, up to the Middle East. And now we are finding new archaeological evidence across the whole of the Middle East to see the extent of Buddhism, which was there in the Middle East, even some parts of North Africa also. We are beginning to find that out now. And they did it all peacefully. All of it was done peacefully. On the sheer merit of the Dhamma. And the whole message was, here is something wonderful, come and see. So this is another aspect, that how is it that in the midst of tremendous diversity, first of all, how does that diversity exist in the first place? Who allowed it to exist? How does it manage to carry on? How do you have a society with tremendous diversity which carries on? And that too without any war. So I will speak about this. One minor point and a major point, and then I'll be done. The minor point is this. One of the ways in which friction was eased or managed between this tremendous variety of competing sects, and they were competing. If you look at this, the ancient texts, each sect, each philosophy is vying for supremacy, declaring its own superiority, its own excellences over the others. But why did it not go into outright violence? They were also competing for resources, for patronage from kings and emperors. And yet, nobody got the bright idea that let me convert this king or emperor to my religion and then weaponize it and use it against everybody else. Nobody, never, up to say 1,000 years ago or so. So, behind all this is an idea which is unique to the Indian subcontinent and which I think is very much relevant even in this 21st century of ours, as recent conflicts also show us. This idea is, in the most ancient text of the Hindu religion, in the Rig Veda, going back maybe at a conservative estimate, 4,000 years maybe, there is a statement in Sanskrit, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one and the wise speak of it differently. The truth is one and the wise speak of it differently. If you go to our Vedanta Society in New York, which is small but historically it is significant, it was founded by Vivekananda in 1894. It's the first Hindu ashram in the West. When you enter, on the wall on the side, you'll see written in big letters, the truth is one and the wise speak of it differently, in Sanskrit and in English. And around it you have the symbols of all the major world religions. Now, this made a tremendous difference to the Indian subcontinent. A recent writer, Robert Wright, he's a neo-Darwinian. He's written this book, The Evolution of God, by which he, of course, does not mean that God evolved, but what he means is that the religions have evolved. And he has used a very Darwinian analysis of it. He talks about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam and how the religions have evolved over time. And at the end of that book, he talks about peace between the major world religions. And he says, what are the prospects of peace? And there he makes a comment that there is one instance in human history, and that is the example of the Indian subcontinent, that these people, they discovered this, they came upon this understanding, the truth is one and the wise speak of it differently, and it seems to have helped them to maintain harmony between religions, at least not to weaponize religion for warfare or violence against each other. And if something like that, he says in that book, if something like that can become a common understanding in the world, then maybe there is possibility for peace between religions, major world religions today. At least not to use religions for war and for exclusion, for infringement upon the rights of the others, and so on. Just by the way, Ken Wilber, he's a well-known intellectual, a kind of public intellectual in the United States. He mentions how young people in the 21st century seem to have lost interest in religion, and there's a huge number of young persons in the United States who don't want to affiliate themselves with any organized religion. So there's a term for them now, spiritual but not religious, SBNR. If they ask them, are you interested? And they say, yes, we are interested. So which religion do you belong to? None. Now, this hemorrhaging of young people in this day and age from organized religion, from traditional religion, across the board. So Ken Wilber says, what are the three? He says there are three key factors which can influence young minds today. If religions are at all interested in stopping this hemorrhage, there's three factors they have to keep in mind. One, the first is they have to stop fighting among each other. They have to stop using religion as an instrument of, superiority, of war, of violence, of saying I'm right, you are wrong. So that is number one. Second is science and rationality. That is, the religions have to stop going contrary to what is already mainstream science, what is already accepted, instead of pushing things which are no longer acceptable to a young mind today. The third thing he says is values. So there are values regarding race and gender and ecology, which are already sort of mainstream today. And if young people find religions are preaching against it or have nothing at all to say about it, then that turns them off. So these three things. The first one, of course, is, I think all three are important for us here. One is stopping inter-religious violence, or at least using religions for violence. Second is rationality and science, at least aligning. You don't have to say what science says, you don't have to teach science in churches and temples, but at least don't say stuff which is entirely, people know it mainstream to be untrue. And third is values in terms of gender, race, ecology, and so on. One of the mechanisms which was evolved in ancient India is exactly this, dialogue. There's a Sanskrit term, vada. Vada means reasoned dialogue, debate, in other words. And they elevated it to an art form. Will Durant says in his History of India that it was like intellectual gladiatorial combat. So, yes, you have entirely different views. Now, instead of fighting over it, you engage in debate. And India, until about a few hundred years ago, had actually a flourishing tradition of this debate. Some remnants of it are still there in India. One variation of it is there in Tibet. There you see the Tibetan monks engaging in a kind of ritualized debate whose roots are in the Nalanda tradition of India. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, basically what we have in Tibetan Buddhism owes it entirely to the Nalanda tradition. Nalanda was one of the first universities in the world in ancient India, in central India and Bihar. Vihara, by the way, the state of Vihara, the word comes from the Sanskrit and Pali word for Buddhist monasteries, Vihara. So this tradition of debate, where opposing points of view you would meet and experts would debate. And some of the rules, as you said, there are house rules for dialogue here. If I tell you one or two of the rules, you'll be amazed to see how relevant they are, these thousands of years ago. One is, let the one side speak, and the other side, before I can reply, I have to say back to you, to your satisfaction, what you have said. Then only I have a right of reply. So something like that, Often when we are talking and arguing, we are often not listening. We are getting ready to reply to you. I am going to say this to you. So it makes sure that you listen and you reply back, state the other person's position. So in some of the ancient dialectical texts, you find it begins with the position of the opponent. This is what you have said, and here is what I have to say to you. So that was a tradition which I think eased some of the friction, that let off the steam, let us say, and in a wonderful way. The Buddhists and the Hindus, for example, there was nearly a period of 900 to 1,000 years when they engaged in intense debate. Major schools of Buddhism, major schools of Hinduism. What were the topics? The big topics. God, the existence of God, or the non-existence of God. An immortal soul, does it exist or does it not exist? And there are opposite views. On epistemology, on language, on every such issue which pertains to philosophical debate. And if you ask who won, I always say this, it depends on who you ask. If you ask me, I'll say we Hindus won it. If you ask the Buddhists, they'll say Buddhists won the debate. But definitely there is no doubt one thing won, and that was philosophy. Philosophy developed. You see the tremendous richness in the vast range of texts and positions in philosophy, realism, idealism, nominalism, all these terms which became current in the last few hundred years in Western philosophy. Already the sophisticated positions were there in ancient Indian debates. So that's one point, the importance of dialogue between different religious positions. It is not just religion, This attitude of diversity is sort of inbuilt into Indian culture. It is not that if you go to a village in India, you will find people quoting Sanskrit text and saying that is why we accept everybody else. No, it's not that. A simple villager who might even be illiterate, might not have heard a single sentence of Sanskrit, still embodies that culture. A rabbi asked me once in India, you're talking so much about harmony of religions, but I don't see the foundations and the committees and the declarations and the manuals. Where is all this? How do you have harmony of religions? I said, yes, we don't have it because we don't need it. Or at least we didn't need it until recently. We don't need it. It's part of the culture. It's not top down. It's not the head of one religion meeting with the head of another religion and then giving a joint declaration which has its own value. It's rather bottom up. It's part of the culture of India. I remember one of our monks who was a host to a well-known Catholic theologian, a priest who came to visit India, and they were walking together in the mountains in the Himalayas, and a poor villager came up from one of the local villages, and as they do in custom, they bowed down to the Hindu monk, and then he went and bowed down to the Christian priest also. And the Christian priest, the father was taken aback, and he said, "Please explain to them, I don't belong to their religion." And our monk laughed and said, "It doesn't make any difference to them. Your particular view or my particular view, it's not important. You are a holy person, and that's what counts for them." Now, this is the underlying, the ethos, which every Indian, if you ask them, they'll say, "Yeah, it's obvious," which is not at all obvious when you come out to the Middle East or to Europe or America. So this is one thing that is, I think, worth noticing. How does this diversity work? I'll tell you in a few points and then stop. I think I've almost run out of time. One is, so if you look under the hood, what's going on? What makes it acceptable to have this kind of a diversity? How is it you're comfortable with believing in God, believing in a different form of God, believing in no God? How is all that okay? One reason is I'm going to get a little theological, metaphysical here. The capacious nature of the ultimate reality. The Indians, the Hindus, truly believe in the infinite nature of the ultimate reality. So they call it, if you look at the word they use for God, we use the word Brahman, which is a Sanskrit word. If you etymologically, it just means the vast, the limitless. So the vast, the limitless, it is so capacious. If you say, is it with form? Certainly. Can it be without form? Certainly. Is it with attributes, without attributes? Certainly. Is it in the male form, female form? Certainly. And much more so. So this capaciousness of the ultimate reality, this was understood. In fact, one thing that we hesitate to do is to limit the nature of the ultimate reality. That, to dictate God can be this much and no further. No, God can be this much and beyond. No boundaries work there. Second, the second building block for this diversity and harmony is the ineffable nature of that ultimate reality. So not only is it infinite, but it cannot be captured in language and human conceptions. So philosophy, theology, linguistic expressions, they can all attempt to capture it, and they do a good job of it, but there's always the remainder. So any expression, there's a Sanskrit phrase, avang manasagocharam, beyond conception, beyond thought, beyond speech. Now when you bring that which is beyond thought and beyond speech into the realm of speech and thought, what you will get, and is what the ancient Indians understood, is various expressions. So you can have various names for God. One great, maybe the major figure in Hinduism in the 19th century, Sri Ramakrishna, who is at the source of our particular tradition in Hinduism. He would say that in the village pond, notice that the Hindus go there and the water, they call it, the Bengali word for water, jal. The Muslims go there and they call it pani. And the Christians, at that time, Calcutta was the capital of the British Empire. So there were Englishmen and Christians there. When the Christians go there, they call it water. But they're all referring to the same thing. This idea that the same reality can be referred to by different names, not just different names, in different philosophies, different theological approaches, different paradigms, different rituals, different stories, different practices, different holy days and different holy places. So all of this, and all of this is equally valid. This was something well understood and sort of in the very blood of the people, I think. And therefore, two more points here. One is, what is the purpose of human life and what is the purpose of religion? This also, the Indians, the Hindus have a peculiar view of their own. The purpose of human life is God realization, enlightenment. There are many words in Sanskrit for that. Mukti, moksha, nirvana, kaivalya, apavarga, endless, which shows the engagement of ancient Indians with this project of enlightenment, freedom, and so on. And if this is the goal of human life, ultimate goal of human life, then the goal of religions is also this. See, this is simplistic and yet it's profound. What is the goal of religion? Is it political unity? In Europe, many would say, yeah, that's the point. Is it nation building? Maybe. Is it making war on others? Yeah, that's a good instrument to use in war, religion. You can raise resources and motivate people to fight against each other, often for centuries. Is that the purpose of religion? What is the purpose of religion? Central purpose of religion. And the Hindus are very clear. Till today, they're very clear about it. It is the purpose of religion is God realization, enlightenment, moksha, nirvana, whatever you call it. There is this high spiritual purpose, and that's the central purpose of religion, because that's the central purpose of human life. Even society should be organized in that way, that to have a transcendent purpose. I remember one of our monks, Swami Ashokananda, in San Francisco in the 1950s, at the beginning of the Cold War between the US and the USSR. He says that I see here two great systems in collision. The capitalist free market system here in the United States and the communist system in the Soviet Union. Now I think either one of them will win, and thank God one side won, not Cold War communism. But anyway, one will win. But even then, even if one wins, neither tells human beings what is there beyond establishment of a capitalist society or a communist society. And then he says, when I look back to the country I have come from, in India, the spiritual ideal is there. Even if a person is not following it right now, it's always there in the culture at the background. That there is a high transcendent purpose which goes beyond this life, beyond death also. And that is a great thing to have in one's life. That beyond wealth, beyond power, beyond all of the worldly concerns, there is a high spiritual purpose open to everybody. And this is the whole purpose of life. And one final thing remains here. So if that is so, if all this is true, if this is accepted, then how do you see religion? And this is key. Religion is seen as a path. As a path to a goal. Sri Ramakrishna says in his a phrase which has become popular in India now, but it sort of encapsulates 3,000-4,000 years of Indian thinking on this subject. Jato mat tato path. As many faiths, so many paths. So Sri Ramakrishna, famously in his own life, it's a well-known story among Indians, that he not only explored various traditions within Hinduism, but also Islam and also Christianity, which was available to him around in his surroundings in 19th century Calcutta at that time. And experientially, not theologically, he comes to the conclusion that all these paths are valid, all of them work, they are paths. So they are, as you do not quarrel over paths, there's no need to quarrel over religion. Now he put it explicitly, but this is something he made explicit which is already implicit in the Indian traditions. So I think I've said a lot, and I also have run out of time. Thank you very much. You can have discussions. Thank you.